Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Words of Life podcast with Adam and Kevin. We are super excited to be back in the studio again. Sorry for the week off, but, travel happens and you got to take time to be with family and celebrate with loved ones and things like that. So, yeah, we had a great time. And now we're all safely back in our home studios, home offices, and things like that. And we are ready to dive back in and finish up this crazy story of the judge Gideon from the book of Judges. But before we do that, how's it going, Kevin? You guys flew back, but you guys have some crazy back and forth between Arizona and Florida in the next few months, right?
Yeah, we did. We flew back Monday evening. So after the wedding on Monday we got to go to the college after you guys took off, went to chapel, saw some people there, and then, got out of there on Monday night. And yeah, we'll go back out there again at the end of April for graduation. And then we'll fly home. And then probably 3 weeks later, Melissa has to finish teaching. When she's done, then we'll probably drive back for a month and be there for about a month.
Yeah.
In June, whatever. So yeah, it'll be a little busy time for us here over the next couple of months, but things are good.
Absolutely. Well, we're hoping to join you if we can, if the schedule works out sometime in there. But there's like so many of our people getting married this year.
Yes, that is right. That is right.
Yeah. So my sister's son Aiden is going to get married in May, so we'll be out in Texas for that. And Adrian, my daughter's getting married in August, and then Kelson's getting married in December, right?
Yep. That's right.
Okay, and I think there may be one more in there that I can't remember right now, but we're going to be doing lots of wedding stuff this year. It's pretty exciting. So, all right. So just to catch us back up to speed, we've covered chapters 7 and 6 and 7 of the story of Gideon from the book of Judges. And if you guys recall, Gideon was this younger man, or the least of the tribe of Manasseh, the least of his family, and he was called by God. And his people in that region was being basically overridden every harvest time by the Midianites. And they were coming in and they were eating up all the food and just camping out in their land and just oppressing them crazily. But God called Gideon, and when we pick up his story, he's actually threshing his own wheat inside of a wine press because they had to hide all of their wheat. And so he was threshing the wheat there when God calls him. Through some tests and some trials, God tells Gideon, hey, the time is upon us. Let's go. It's time to take out the Midians and just drive them out. So Gideon gathers this huge army, and God says, you know what? For the sake of pride and for the sake of glorifying me, God, we're going to whittle down your army to 300 men.
Yeah.
And so that's what happens. So they have this crazy, cool plan where they had foxes and they had torches inside of these clay jars, and all 300 of the men basically surrounded this camp on all sides. And it was said that there were, like, as far as the eye could see, it was how big this camp was. And it was people and camels and all their herds and things like that. But they surrounded the camp. They broke the clay jars, lit up the camp, and started shouting and blowing trumpets. The camp of Midian got all crazy and started attacking each other, and they basically wiped themselves out and then ran away. Is that a pretty good summary, I think?
Yeah, that's right. And so then, we kind of had this pursuit, and, when it gets to the pursuit phase, right, it's more than just 300 now, because he calls to the rest of the people saying, come down and help us pursue. And so they do, and they hold the different fords and places in the Jordan where you could cross. But they do cross over the Jordan to go and kind of finish up the cleanup, if you will. And that kind of brought us, into the start of chapter 8, where, these people, princes of Midian, Oreb and Zebah, were killed by some of the men of Ephraim, right? And killed them. And that's kind of where we left off, is Gideon is over there. The main pursuit has ceased as far as like the generals, let's say, but there are still some kings and stuff on the run. And so that's where we're going to pick up when we start in verse 4 here tonight.
Well, of course, right at the very end there, you mentioned Ephraim, and then they took out those two leaders.
Yeah.
But then they complained.
Yeah, that they didn't get called to battle.
They're like, hey, we're mad at you now because you didn't call us to help with the battle. And he's like, whoa, hey, you guys did the most.
Yeah, you guys got the glory of killing the two guys, right?
Glory of killing the bad guys, right? And so they're like, okay, yeah, I guess all the glory is ours. And that appeased them. That leaves us right to verse 4 of chapter 8. Do you want to read some, or do you want to just go through bullet point by bullet point?
Let's read a little bit of it here because it'll kind of get the story going there, right?
Perfect.
Verse 4, Gideon came to the Jordan and crossed over, he and the 300 men who were with him, exhausted yet pursuing. So he said to the men of Succoth, please give loaves of bread to the people who follow me, for they are exhausted, and I am pursuing after Zebah and Zalmunna, the kings of Midian. And the officials of Succoth said, are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna already in your hand, that we should give bread to your army? So Gideon said, well then, when the Lord has given Zebah and Zalmunna into my hand, I will flail your flesh with the thorns of the wilderness and with briars. And from there he went up to Penuel, and he spoke to them in the same way. And the men of Penuel answered him as the men of Succoth had answered. And he said to the men of Penuel, when I come again in peace, I will break down this tower. Now Zebah and Zalmunna were in Karkor with their army, about 15,000 men, all who were left of the army of the people of the east, for there had fallen 120,000 men who drew the sword. And Gideon went up by the way of the tent dwellers east of Nobah and Jogbehah and attacked the enemy, for the army felt secure. And Zebah and Zalmunna fled, and he pursued them and captured the two kings of Midian, Zebah and Zalmunna, and he threw all the army into a panic. So we get kind of the end of the story here as far as the battles are concerned against the enemy.
Yeah.
And he's pursuing these two guys, Zebah, Zalmunna. Again, they've been chasing him. There go. So he asked these two different cities along the way, Succoth and Penuel, for food. And they both basically say, whoa, you don't have these kings yet, right? Maybe they're nervous about what if we help and you lose, then what's the repercussions going to be? And so he says, well, when I get them, I'm going to come back and I'll deal with you along the way. And then he goes and he does capture them, and he defeats the rest of the army, and the rest are dispersed and run back to Midian as far as we can tell.
Yeah, it's really crazy to think at that point in the story, 120,000 men had fallen.
Yeah.
And a vast majority of those fell at the breaking of the jars and surrounded by the 300 guys, right?
Yeah.
Mathematically speaking, in military terms, there's no way that 300 men swung the sword to wipe out 120,000 guys, right? And so the fact that God caused so much confusion and they were basically killing themselves is just wild to think about.
Yeah.
And really, I mean, to think of 120,000 men slain on the battlefield is atrocious. It's really, really gross and disgusting, and it's a huge amount of people slain. But they were oppressors, and they were idolatrous foreign evil nation, and they so God was punishing them justifiably, for sure.
Yeah. We had talked a little bit before this interesting thing that he does, right? Because, the story of Gideon's interesting. A lot of these are the ones, it happens, I don't get any end after that. It's just over. And then it says, and they had peace 40 years or 80 years or whatever, all the days of that judge, right? In the Deborah and Barak one, we got a song, right? It's, hey, it sounds good. And no, it's peace for, right? This one is complicated. The end here is not all roses as it was. I mean, we'll get down before that. It will say they'll have peace for 40 years, but that peace even comes at some things that are going to happen here. 2 other people in Israel, right? These are not these 2 towns. These are Israelite towns. And then the fallout from this is going to be some more idolatry. It's going to be his next generation is going to have problems. So yeah, the legacy of Gideon is complicated after the good stuff up front that we have there. So, and he says these things that we mentioned, right? Like, I will come and I will flail your flesh with the thorns of the wilderness and briars. And then he comes to the next town. It's, I will tear down this tower, right? It's these strange threats, proclamations, consequences he's going to bring with them as he comes back. Yeah, he's heated at these places for not giving him aid.
Well, they're brethren.
Yeah.
And according to the law, they're supposed to show hospitality.
Mm-hmm.
God commanded that of each other. There were rules and regulations about how to treat your neighbor, and Gideon wasn't asking anything that shouldn't have been expected.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
And he's going to follow through. He's going to make good on these, if you will, right, as he comes back along the way. in the next couple of verses there, 13 through 21, we'll kind of see how that works out there.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. You want to just pick up at 13 there?
Sure.
All right. So after he captured Zebah and Zalmunna, and threw their army into a panic, it says in 13, it says, then Gideon the son of Joash returned from the battle by the ascent of Heres, or Heres, and he captured a young man of Succoth and questioned him. And he wrote down for him the officials and elders of Succoth, 77 men. And he came to the men of Succoth and said, behold, Zebah and Zalmunna, about whom you taunted me, saying, are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna already in your hand, that we should give bread to your men who are exhausted? And he took the elders of the city, and he took thorns of the wilderness and briars, and with them taught the men of Succoth a lesson. Like, just stop right there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty dramatic. But he kept every letter of the law, every threat that he made, right?
Yeah, it wasn't just, I'm going to do this, but then he really whipped him with, a whip.
Yeah.
He's like, no, let's go out and let's get a bunch of thorns and briars and string them together and beat him with them.
Yeah, and he taught the men of Succoth a lesson.
Yeah.
Okay. Verse 17, and he broke down the tower of Penuel and killed the men of the city. Then he said to Zebah and Zalmunna, where are the men whom you killed at Tabor? They answered, as you are, so were they. Every one of them resembled the son of a king. And he said, they were my brothers, the sons of my mother. As the Lord lives, if you had saved them alive, I would not kill you. So he said to Jether his firstborn, rise and kill them. But the young man did not draw his sword, for he was afraid, because he was still a young man. So I'm assuming the crescent ornaments were kingly attire.
Yeah, gold something, right? You put on your camel, you're all decked out.
Yeah, they're all decked out, saying, "Hey, we're the special guys." It's interesting that he asked his son,
to
kill them.
Yeah, it is an interesting thing there, right? And I don't know how old the son was; he's still a young man, right? But he basically has these guys here and says, "Hey, all right, boy, it's time to become a man. Basically, go kill these guys, right? For killing your uncles, effectively." And he won't do it, and so he kills them himself after some taunting, right? Come kill us yourself if you want us dead, kind of a thing. And so he does, and you kind of see. I don't know. Is it real? Is it accurate? Who knows? But you see this motif play out a lot across. Either historical records or fictional accounts of this time period, right? The young person being ordered to kill the enemy, kind of a thing, and so this is not strange or out of place, I guess, in that sense. But it's a curious thing that it's recorded for us. It's not like we're going to see this guy again later, right? The next story is not about Jether, his firstborn. It's about Abimelech, another one of his kids, right? Mm-hmm. So the fact it's recorded here is very interesting. But yeah, he is trying to give him the honor, the glory, I assume, right? Of saying, you were the one, like above, right? At the beginning of chapter 8, when the men of Ephraim are upset, he says, look, God gave into your hands the princes of Midian, Oreb and Zeb. You had the honor of killing them, right? Even if we go back to Deborah and Barak, right? This thing of like, he will not be, because, Barak says, I'll go only if you go with me. And Deborah says, that's fine, but the glory of killing them is not going to be yours, right? And a woman kills them instead, right? And so it's that same thing here. Gideon is trying to give the glory of, you are the kingslayer for the rest of your life. You killed the kings who were oppressing us, right? He's trying to set him up for success in that way. But it says he's not. He's afraid because he's a young man, and so he kills him himself instead. But again, why it's recorded, I don't know. Other than that, it's just right with the time and happened.
Yep. Just that was the way it went. That's why it was recorded.
How it went down, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I do want to touch on that statement they say though there, right? Like he asks these two kings, where are the men you killed at or where are the men who you killed at Tabor, right? And so Gideon's brothers apparently were killed, right? That we don't know this before this, right? And so he asks them about this, and they say every one of them resembled the son of a king. Now, what that means, I don't know, right? But he says, those were my brothers, right? And if you hadn't killed them, I wouldn't have killed you, but now I'm going to. And so that kind of goes back to this thing we had said before, where there's this picture of Gideon saying, I'm the least of my family, and my clan is the smallest of all the clans in Manasseh, right? Yet when these people describe his brothers, they say they were all like princes, right? And so again, when you go back and you see Gideon's original statement, it's hard to know how much of it is like accurate. No, we really are a small nothing clan.
Or false humility.
False humility, or just trying to say, no, God, you've got the wrong guy, right? Sort of a thing. Because like we already mentioned, they have this altar, and when they tear it down, all the men of the town are upset, right, with his father. Now his brothers are being described as princes of the land, effectively. Now, what does that mean, right? I don't think it means they were strong and tall of stature and whatever. Somehow they looked the part, right? Whether it was their, dress or whatever. And so, yeah, it's just an interesting sort of insight, perhaps, into the family of Gideon.
Yeah, for sure. And like the fact that they remembered these men, they're like, yeah, of course we were wiping everybody out, and those guys were rich. Of course we took them out.
It's not like, who? I don't even know who you're talking about. We killed lots of people at Tabor, right?
Like, they know. Yeah, that was a great haul that day.
Yeah, they know who they're talking about, right? And so he does. It's an interesting, again, just insight into Gideon and his family, perhaps, before we get to the story for real.
So then we have this really odd, like, tail end of the story of Gideon.
Yeah.
After he does his main mission of redeeming the people from Midian and causing their oppression to be no more, so that the people could heal and they could have prosperity again in the land, we see this it's just weird.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's complicated.
Yeah.
More than weird, I guess, right? Why don't you go ahead and pick it up in 22, and if you want to just read some or most, or
so
point, whatever.
Let's pick it up in 22, right? It says, Then the men of Israel said to Gideon, Rule over us, you and your son and your grandson also, for you have saved us from the hand of Midian. Gideon said to them, I will not rule over you, and my son will not rule over you. The Lord will rule over you. And Gideon said to them, Let me make a request of you. Every one of you give me the earring from his spoil, for they had golden earrings because they were Ishmaelites. And they answered, We will willingly give them. And they spread a cloak, and every man threw in the earrings of his spoil. And the weight of the golden earrings that he requested was 1,700 shekels of gold, besides the crescent ornaments and the pendants and the purple garments worn by the kings of Midian, and besides the collars that were around the necks of their camels. So stop there for just a second before we keep going, right? So this seems like it's going to end really good, right? He's the deliverer. They come to him and they say, Be the king and your descendants after us, right? Because you're our great deliverer. And Gideon's response is like, man, perfect, right? I will not be king. I turn it down. My children will not be kings either, because we will serve the Lord. The Lord is our king, right? And really that picture there is he's saying, Jehovah is going to rule over us, right? We get it translated weirdly, but he's saying God is our king, right? And you're like, man, that's a good end of the story, right? Like that's perfect. And then he asks for this thing, if you want to give us something, just give us the spoils here. Each one of you give us an earring. Okay, that's not that big of an ask, right? When you total it all up, it comes to a big amount, right? But each of you give us an earring, and I've got the robes that I took from the kings I killed, and I've got their camel ornaments, and I've got their things. So I'll be a wealthy guy, but then we'll just retire in peace, right? Kind of seems like how the story's going to end, right? But then we get 27, right? And Gideon made an ephod out of it, and he put it in his city in Ophrah, and all Israel whored after it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and to his family. So Midian was subdued before the people of Israel, and they raised their heads no more, and the land had rest for 40 years in the days of Gideon, right? And so it's like good, but then all the spoils he got, he basically turned it into this elaborate garment, right? This that was never for wearing, apparently, right? It was just to memorialize the victory, and he puts it there on display in his city, and it almost becomes an idol to the people, right? I mean, it doesn't say they worshipped it, but this phrase "they whored after it" there is kind of the language of idolatry, right? God will say, you went whoring after all the other gods and these kinds of things, and it became a snare to them, right? Whether they were actually worshiping it as an idol or whether they were just it was how God had said, I want you to understand that I'm giving you the victory.
Yeah.
But by making this ephod and putting it up there as a memorial to the victory, everyone goes and is like, look how great Gideon was, right? Look how Gideon delivered us, right? I mean, that's kind of the ask even, right? You delivered us from the hands of the Midianites. And so it becomes this snare to the family of Gideon that, yeah, maybe we are something. Maybe we did do this great thing when they should have kept saying, hey, God delivered you. I had 300 people. We couldn't have done this on our own, right? The whole telling the story of the river and the whittling down of people. God gave the victory became instead, here's this great war memorial we built to ourselves of our great victory there. And it just becomes this problem to them in his family, which again is kind of a sad end of the story of how it should have ended, right?
Yeah. I was when we were reading through this, it made me think of Israel at Mount Sinai, right? And the same kind of thing happened.
Everybody take your
Aaron.
earrings and they make your gold cap out of it.
Hey, everybody pitch in, from the spoils of Egypt.
Yeah.
And we're gonna make an idol, a golden calf.
Right.
Now we will say this is representative.
Yeah, this is the
Jehovah,
God who brought you out of the land, right?
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But that's not following. In fact, Moses had already come down and is like, I gave you the 10 Commandments. You shall have no other gods before me.
Right.
What are you doing?
Right.
And so it's reminiscent of that, as you read through this Gideon story, so.
Yeah. And that's something there. I'm not sure exactly what, right? But this idea of taking these earthly spoils, right? This material wealth, which you've gained because of what God has done. Right? The Egyptians gave you this stuff to get you out of the land, right? You got all of this spoil because of what God had done in delivering Midian into you, right? And you take those earthly things that are things of this earthly victory that God has given you, and you turn it into spiritual idolatry, right? You turn it into this idolatry. And so we sometimes talk about today, like, our idol today is money as opposed to actual idols. And you're like, but their idols were money too, right? Like they took gold stuff that they got as spoils of victory, money, and they turned it into an idol. They were worshiping the material wealth is what they were doing, right? Same as us. So maybe it's not so different. We just don't give it a name.
Yeah, you're right. We're not necessarily fashioning literal statues.
I don't take dollar bills and turn it into a pile and worship the pile literally. Yeah.
I mean, origami maybe, right?
Yeah, right, sure.
But yeah, no, it is fascinating. The idea of idolatry. I mean, because we have literal idolatry spoken throughout the Bible.
Yeah.
And so today, while we don't necessarily have literal forms of worship with statuesque representation, the spirit of idolatry lives loud and clear and strong in the world.
It's funny. We were talking about this last night. So we have this class we do with the teens at our church on Monday nights. And we were talking about something totally different, right? But one of the passages that got brought up, because we were talking about how do you treat the world, right? How do believers treat the world? And one of the passages that one of the kids had found was where Paul is talking about if someone invites you to dinner and you're inclined to go, and they set food before you, just eat it. Don't ask any questions. But if they tell you this was offered to an idol, right, then don't eat it because of all reasons. And so the kids started asking some questions. We were like, we don't really have things like that today. But then we realized, but we do. I mean, literally that same thing. Mm-hmm. We just think we don't because we're in Christian circles and in Western world. But we're like, if you go into most nail or hair salons that might be owned by people of Asian descent, a lot of times you'll see these little Buddha statues, and they'll be fruit and things and stuff that's all set out there, right, for this thing. And so then Melissa started looking up on her phone and oh, no, they'll eat it afterwards. And it's blessed. You offer it to the little statue, and then at the end of the day, it gets taken, and it's holy food that you can partake in, right? Yeah. It's exactly the same thing. And so we do have idolatry in a very real, physical, practical sense. We're just not engaged in that kind of idolatry anymore. Yeah. But it is still prevalent all over the world.
Yeah. I suppose you're true. In terms of Buddhists, for sure. I can't profess to be an expert in any of those things.
Yeah.
So.
But there are other places that have shrines and things and whatever. And, it's not exactly the same, right? But you have the Dia de los Muertos ceremonies. You have the ofrendas, and you put out this food and stuff for the deceased, right? And it's, again, you're not worshiping them, but it's very akin, right? So these practices are still tying the spiritual to the physical in a physical way of offerings and things is still going on strong in our world today. But yeah, this idea of the money turning into a god is the same thing today. We just don't literally melt it down anymore.
Yeah, and I don't know what was Gideon thinking. Like,
I know.
He says, "No, I won't be your king," and yet either purposefully or carelessly sets up another form of worship.
Yeah.
God is your God. No, I'm not going to be your king. You follow the Lord.
Yeah. And as far as I can tell, his intent, I mean, it's hard to say because he does make an ephod, which is typically associated with priests. But it's the closest I can sort of wrap my head around is it almost seems as though he takes this stuff and he makes a war memorial out of it. Right?
Yeah. That seems appropriate.
And like that's what he's trying to do. And what happens, though, is that the memorial becomes a memorial to him as opposed to a memorial to God, right? It would be as though, right? And look, we do, I guess it's not even as though, we have monuments that are set up all over the place, of whatever. And a lot of times they're associated with wars, right? The Vietnam Memorial, you have all these memorials of men in Washington, D.C., the Washington Memorial, and then, on and on and on. You have all of them, right? And it would be as though those things got set up and then people started to sort of revere those things more than they do God, right?
Right.
And as I was thinking that, I'm like, no, that actually does happen. Mm-hmm. Like people revere our nation more than God. And I would say that's even happening in Christianity, right?
Yeah,
Christianity has becoming very much wrapped up with our national pride in a way that's dangerously close to what happened here in Gideon, right?
Yeah.
We set up these memorials. Now we start worshiping the man more than the God who gave the victory, right?
Yeah. Well, I was listening to this other podcast not too long ago. I can't remember exactly when. He was talking about the idea of politics and Christianity and how sometimes they get intertwined and mixed. And he said, we really need to make sure that we are Christian Americans, not American Christians.
Sure.
Right? Meaning that as a Christian, we need to have one God, one ruler, one Lord,
right?
One
citizenship,
focus,
one,
right? We have one citizenship for sure. And that is with God and Christ in heaven, our eternal one. And we should have our beliefs and our foundations that are written in the Bible be that which rules our citizenship in America, right? So how we vote should be dictated by our morals that are directed and constructed by our faith, and not the other way around.
Yeah,
right. So if and a lot of people get that mixed up, where they're America first, they start elevating America to a status that we don't have any evidence or proof that it was intended by God to be the replacement of Israel or whatever spiritual nation.
Yeah.
While we can all agree that the forefathers and the founders of this country appear to have had Judeo-Christian foundational principles that they were trying to adhere to, which I applaud, that doesn't supersede our responsibility to following the Bible.
Yeah. And even if, right, like you say, let's just presuppose even for a minute that America was supposed to be some sort of thing that God had set up as some sort of Christian nation. Even if that is true, I mean, I grant you that argument for a minute, which I'm not convinced. It's no more so than Israel, right? And what did he do with that? When it had served its purpose and they had left and whatever, he gives them over. I mean, we're reading about it right now, time and time again in Judges, right? You are my people. You are my special nation. And still I hand you over every time you disobey, right?
Yeah.
And go after these other things. So even if we were, you clearly are more elevated than that was, right? And so we should take to heed the same thing that's happening
for
here,
sure.
Right?
Well,
for sure.
Plus you fast forward all the way to some of the letters of Paul, like Romans chapter 1. How many times in that chapter, or is it chapter 2, 1 or 2, where he says, Paul records, and God gave them up or gave them over. He says, nope, I'm going to hand you over to your own wickedness.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that today. And all of those things play out in real time. Not that they may not have had happened in the past, but I see that loud and clear that, we're at a big risk of God just handing us over,
Yeah.
Giving us over. As a nation.
Yeah. And look, it's, we sometimes, now let me be very careful about how I say this. The Proverbs make it clear, right? That and the New Testament does as well, that believers, that followers of God, that people who are righteous and faithful act as a preserving agent in the world, right? We talk about being salt and light, and we talk about light a lot. It's obvious. Salt, right? What does salt do? Salt is this preserving sort of a thing. And, we can see even back as we're reading the Old Testament, even in places that are wicked, right? Why does Abraham not get the land right away when he goes there? Because the trespasses of those nations are not yet complete. There's righteousness enough still going on that God does not just destroy them immediately, right? We'll see even with the story of Jonah, right? Nineveh is awful. Assyria is awful, right? But when he sends someone to them, they repent, right? And so he doesn't just wipe out. So righteousness is this preserving sort of thing on a nation. But at the same time, we shouldn't imagine that if we can all just turn America into righteousness, that somehow God will let America last forever and ever, and it will be utopia on earth, and judgment is never going to come, right? The end of the world is coming sooner or later, regardless of how righteous our individual nation is, right? We're not going to stop that. There's a day and a time he knows what that is. And so there's this balance there. The nation is, as Romans 13 and 1 Peter 2 will tell us, the nation is just a tool that God uses. He uses governments and authority as a tool to bring stability to chaos in an unrighteous world. I don't need the government to pass laws to tell me not to murder my neighbor, right? And I don't need to fear the sword to stop me from doing it. I don't murder my neighbor because I love my neighbor as myself, right? But wicked people need that, right? And that's the purpose there.
Yeah.
And so, you have this interesting interplay that goes on. And so, while we see degradation, we see things happen, nations are going to rise and fall, and God will do as he wills there. And our job certainly is to be the preserving peace we can in the places we are, live at peace as much as we can, and pray for our rulers, right? That's our role in that as believers, same as it was back here. When they're following 100%. God, they have peace in their land, right? And when they don't, then they don't.
Well, and you see time and time again that they need to be reminded to put God first, right? And so we see this here. And despite Gideon's perceived intent to do something good, it turns out to be something bad. So we rejecting one idol while building another one is still idolatry, right?
And it's a strange bookend to the story, right? Because remember, it starts with them tearing down the altar of Baal, right? And now it sort of ends with the setting up of a new idol, if you will, right? Though that doesn't appear to be his intent.
Or at least something that becomes one.
It becomes one, yes. You have this tearing down and the setting up at the end, and it turns into a new cycle of it there. And in fact, we'll see they'll, again, worship the Baals even after. They're right where they started 40 years later, right? It's just crazy. Delayed the clock, if you will, a little while.
Yep. So Gideon made an ephod of it and put it in his city in Ophrah. And all Israel whored after it, and it became a snare to Gideon and to his family. Midian was subdued before the people of Israel, and they raised their heads no more, which is great. So they conquered Midian, and the land had rest for 40 years in the days of Gideon. However, Jerubbaal, a.k.a. Gideon, the son of Joash, went and lived in his own house. He had 70 sons. That's a lot of sons.
Yeah.
His own offspring, for he had many wives. Okay. Do you see a problem coming up?
Yeah.
And his concubine, who was in Shechem, also bore him a son, and he called his name Abimelech. And Gideon, the son of Joash, died in a good old age, was buried in the tomb of Joash's father at Ophrah of the Abiezrites. Abiezrites?
Your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah. As soon as Gideon died, didn't take long.
Yeah.
The people of Israel turned again and whored after the Baals and made Baal Berith their god. And the people of Israel did not remember the Lord their God, Jehovah, who had delivered them from the hand of all their enemies on every side, and they did not show steadfast love to the family of Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, in return for all the good that he had done to Israel. So as long as Gideon was alive, it seems that he kept the Baal worship at bay.
In check.
But as soon as it was done, they're like, nope, we don't really care about Gideon anymore. We're going to serve whatever we want. And listen, what's the draw to not serving God?
Yeah. It's an interesting sort of thing. I suppose there's lots of reasons why. I mean, it's the same there today, right? Realistically, whether you're serving whatever you name it, right, or you call this thing as my God, those things typically result in living however you want to live, right? Like, okay, God gives his people a law and he demonstrates his power and he lays these things out, but he says, you have to keep my covenant. You have to do these things, right? But the balls don't require that, right? I can set up whatever God I want. I can make myself my own God. I'll do what I want to do. I mean, it's no surprise that many of these cultic, pagan, idolatrous practices, worship, involved sexual immorality as part of the worship, right? Like it's this is what I want to do, and I'm just going to call it religion, effectively, right? As opposed to I don't want to eat kosher, and I don't want to not work on the Sabbath, and I don't want to be kind to my neighbor. I want to exploit them for money. I don't want to, right? I want to just do the things I want to do and follow after my own sinful human nature. And sometimes I just say I don't believe in God, and sometimes I whitewash it with religion, which is what they're doing here, right? It's not like the Baal worship practices looked like Judaism, right? The lifestyle is different, and that's
Completely.
really the thing, right? That's really the thing, which I think is the draw. I will serve myself.
Absolutely. They felt appeased by still following some sort of a God.
Yeah.
Right? Hey, I have a God. I'm following a God. It's fine. Everything's good. Which, in some weird, twisted way, apparently maybe assuages the conscience in some way.
Yeah, or at least it builds up some answers to questions, right?
Yeah.
Where does this all come from? Well, it's this God that created it. Okay, great, right? And what does he require of me? That I sacrifice my enemies. Oh, that sounds easy. Okay, sounds good, right?
Right. Yeah.
That's the same things that's happening. That's a typical practice. I mean, certainly when it gets to its full degradation, they're sacrificing their own children. I mean, a lot of times, the Aztecs and these people, who are they killing? Well, not my people. I'm killing the prisoners of war, right?
Yeah, exactly.
God asked me to kill my enemies. Okay, I'm in, right? Like our God asks us to love our enemies. It's a harder thing, right?
So one of the lessons I think that we can draw from the story is that people love heroes, but forget God very fast.
Yeah.
Sometimes, even in our own Christian circles, we may have very influential Bible scholarly type people, preachers and pastors and shepherds and people that just have a big impact in our life. They like maybe a preacher you grew up with, for decades. And, he's become such a regular feeder of spirituality for you that you elevate this man, sometimes even without thinking about it. I think there's definitely a trap there. So we talk oftentimes for our listeners, we talk about this college in Florida that our kids have gone to. And it's a great institution, don't get me wrong, but there are traps and some things that could be bad about an environment like that, When we elevate, like they have these lectures every year, which is great, but it's a collection of really popular preachers sometimes that get a chance to speak to a large audience of people, and we inner people circles will this name and that name, and we will name names of men, right, who do great work in the kingdom. Don't get me wrong, but sometimes the elevation of those men in our minds can become a problem. So it seems like it's here. Gideon was elevated to the status of a hero, but as soon as he was gone, the anchor that Gideon was providing disappeared, which means that he did not do a good enough job of providing a spiritual foundation for the people. He was just imposing his own will that they weren't going to be serving the Baals.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing, right? Because in one sense, he's respected, he's whatever, right? But he said, I'm not going to be your king, right? I'm not going to be your king over you. God is going to rule over you. And so people are willing to sort of go along with that because Gideon's at the forefront of it right now. But, in the other sense, it's not Gideon's responsibility. It was the Levites' responsibility. It was the priest's responsibility. And noticeably, who's absent from all of these stories, right? We're not hearing about the priests. We're not hearing about the Levites doing the thing they were intended to do, right? The Levites had cities spread out throughout the nation of Israel, the towns they were given. Why? Why are they spread out? Not all of them are there serving in Jerusalem, offering the sacrifice. Why are they spread out? Because they're supposed to be teaching the law and doing these things throughout the land and keeping people, right? We're not seeing these stories about the stuff that's supposed to be happening. The tabernacle exists, right? Yeah. But we're not reading about people going to the tabernacle for the feast of Passover. We're not seeing that here, right? Because the religious center of the nation is effectively not doing its job, right? It's completely abdicated. And so in the vacuum of that, whatever judge delivers them becomes the thing that the people hold to until they're gone. Yep. But what was supposed to happen is the Levites were supposed to perpetually be there, and the priests were perpetually supposed to be there doing this work. And it's not happening. Why? I don't know, but it's not, and that's the problem we're seeing.
Well, and that's something that we should just pay attention to, right? So Psalm 146 is a great psalm that kind of ties into this. If you wanted to pull that up, Kev, but it says right there at the beginning of Psalm 146 is praise the Lord, O my soul. I will praise the Lord as long as I live. I will sing praises to my God while I have my being. Put not your trust in princes, in a son of man, in whom there is no salvation. When his breath departs, he will return to the earth. On that very day, his plans perish. So it's making this contrast between elevating a man versus the eternal nature of God, who we can put our trust in.
Yeah.
Right? So when we put our trust in a man, whether it's a president of the United States, which seems to be extremely controversial, everybody has either a hate or a love or a something.
Yeah.
All of the presidents, right? When we start focusing on who's leading this or who's leading that, it's the wrong, we're putting our faith in the wrong thing.
That's right. Oh, absolutely. 100%.
Right.
And, what we're going to see, and we're not even done with this, right, is next week we'll look at the next chapter there where, I mean, the ramifications of this even outlive Gideon.
Yeah.
Right. Like his son, why is Abimelech mentioned here? Because he's going to be a problem child in the next chapter. Right. And it's going to be this challenge that, again, this failing here is going to have generational impact, even sort of beyond him, which, maybe Abimelech is part of the reason people don't have any love for the house of Gideon and they go after and serve whatever. Because it's, like Samuel, right? Your sons are bums, right? And so,
like we don't want them leading us.
So we're going to serve the Baals instead. So we'll see that play out as it goes. But yeah, the failures of man is what we're going to continue to see throughout, and it almost gets worse as Judges goes along here, right?
Yep.
You have these first judges, these things happen. Oh, things good. And there's peace in the land. There's much rejoicing, right? Now we're seeing Gideon and the problem that's going to cause, right? We'll get some other short ones. We'll get to Samson, who's very problematic. And then we get to the end of the book, we're going to get these just atrocious stories of how people are doing whatever they want, right? And so we're seeing the degradation of that as people continue to put their trust in man after man after man, generation after generation after generation.
Absolutely.
And what happens as a result.
So as we've said in the past, the book of Hebrews is one of our favorite books. Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. I'd like to just kind of leave us with this thought. So Hebrews chapter 12 is obviously just following Hebrews 11, which is a massive book of faith, the chapter of faith, talking about all of these heroes of faith in the past that endured so much. And then right there in verse 1 of chapter 12 it says, therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, referring to all those people in chapter 11, let us lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. So if we find ourselves putting our faith in anything in this world or in any other person above the faith and the obedience that we have for God, then you can think about this verse, because we have Jesus and we need to put our faith and our trust in him and look to him, because he's the author and perfecter of our faith. So leave you with that. Any more questions or last thoughts, Kev?
No, we'll look forward to seeing Abimelech. I look forward is an interesting way to put that. Next time and how that story plays out. This guy was introduced at the end of the chapter. So
we shall.
Chapter 9 next time.
We shall look forward to Abimelech.
Yes.
That's right. All right, everybody. Have a great one. We'll see you next time.